Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 30-second webinar on the secret teachings of all ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. Previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine. Okay, during our last webinar, we finished our survey of the Kabiric mysteries, probably the most profound of all the Greek mysteries. We can't know for sure because of the hidden aspect, especially of the higher grades. But certainly there were many indications that the mysteries that took place in this temple called the Sanctuary of the Gods in Samothrace were of a deeply profound nature. Today, we'll begin with the concluding paragraph of the myth of the dying god, which we've been on now for many months, and also which is the last section of the chapter entitled Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity. So we're just with this paragraph wrapping up this whole chapter. So could we get a reader, please?
Carrie. Oh, a reader. I thought we were going to do the song. Never mind.
So,
okay.
Oh, no, yeah. I forgot to mention that we also took a stab at least at analyzing Odin's rune song, but no, we're just right here on the very last chapter of last paragraph of the chapter.
Okay, go ahead, Carrie, please.
Okay. From a consideration of all these ancient and sacred rituals, it becomes evident that the mystery of the dying god was universal among the illumined and venerated colleges of the sacred teaching. This mystery has been perpetuated in Christianity in the crucifixion and death of the God-man Jesus the Christ. The secret import of this world tragedy and the universal martyr must be rediscovered if Christianity is to reach the heights attained by the pagans in the days of their philosophic supremacy. The myth of the dying god is the key to both universal and individual redemption and regeneration. And those who do not comprehend the true nature of this supreme allegory are not privileged to consider themselves either wise or truly religious.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, first, from a consideration of all these ancient and secret rituals, it becomes evident that the mystery of the dying god was universal among the illumined and venerated colleges of the sacred teaching. Out of the dozen plus mystery schools that we've considered in this webinar series, all, with the possible exception of the Druids because their teachings were not written down, but all have had an avatar or teacher of superior consciousness that sacrificed his life for the good of humanity. Next, the mystery has been perpetuated in Christianity in the crucifixion and death of the God-man Jesus the Christ. Since Christianity is one of the primary mystery schools of our time, it is useful to view it as part of this one great story that we've been studying all these really a couple of years, which is illustrated by all the mystery schools down the ages. Next, the secret import of this world tragedy and the universal martyr must be rediscovered if Christianity is to reach the heights attained by the pagans in the days of philosophic supremacy. So when we look at this quote unquote universal martyr from the greater perspective of its being one example in many, we begin to see it for what it truly is, a well-trod path chosen by a long line of avatars to bring light into the world. And we know from HPB's secret doctrine that Tammuz and Osiris were not the first avatars to sacrifice their lives for humankind. It's the first that we have historical evidence of, but they weren't the first. So just what is the secret of the universal martyr? We've touched on various aspects of this subject over the last 2 years, and there is much that remains hidden. But a key aspect is found in the Christ's words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Unfortunately, no, tragically, this has been grossly misinterpreted by the church to mean something like only Christians can come to God. But when the Christ is seen as a principle inherent in each of us, which is a key tenet of theosophy, we come to realize that this principle exists in all religions. Udin's runes, Pan's flute, Orpheus' lyre, all were expressive of some aspect of the path of return. And finally, we have the myth of the dying God is the key to both universal and individual redemption and regeneration. Universal because each of these avatars anchored some specific quality in the societies into which they incarnated. Individual because all avatars are one with the kingdom of souls, and it is through soul alignment and infusion that redemption comes about. Okay, any thoughts or questions on anything in this section on called the myth of the dying God? This isn't the end of our study of the mystery schools. In fact, the next chapter of the secret teachings, entitled The Life and Writings of Thoth, Hermes, Trismegistus, takes us into ancient Egypt, where we'll discover one of the primary sources of the mysteries. Any questions before we move on? All righty then. When we turn the page of the folio edition of the Secret Teachings, we're met with a J.A. Knapp illustration entitled Hermes Standing on the Back of Typhon. And there's quite a long caption underneath this illustration. So could we get a reader for this and then the next page? Please.
Hermes, as the personification of the universal wisdom, is here depicted with his foot upon the back of Typhon, the vanquished dragon of ignorance and perversion. To the Egyptian initiates, Typhon, the devourer of souls, signified the lower world which swallows up the spiritual nature of individuals who, being imperfect, is forced to descend from the higher spheres and be reborn into the physical universe. To be swallowed by Typhon, therefore, signifies the process of rebirth from which man can only release himself by vanquishing his mortal adversary. In one hand, Hermes carries the caduceus, a winged rod with 2 fighting serpents entwined about it. In the other, the immortal emerald, upon whose surface was inscribed in raised letters the sum of philosophy. The figure wears the ancient Egyptian Masonic apron according to the pattern discovered by Belzoni, the eminent Egyptologist. The 2 small circles contain the forms and symbols most closely associated with Hermes. In the upper circle is the ibis, whose curious characteristics have caused it to be particularly associated with the medical art. In the initiation ceremonies, the Egyptian priestess wore masks in the form of the ibis head to identify that they represented the attributes of Thoth or Hermes. The lower circle contains the dog, an animal always associated with Hermes because of its intelligence and devotion.
Okay, and another reader for this last part.
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Upon the forehead of Hermes appears the uraeus, the secret symbol of the constellation of Scorpio, which represents the regeneration of the same power that in the form of a dragon lies helpless under his foot. The scarab over the heart of Hermes represents the presence of the spiritual and regenerative light within his own soul. The collar typifies by its circles the orbits of the heavenly bodies. The 3 points of the tail of Typhon, which end in arrows, indicate the 3 destructive expressions of universal energy: mental, moral, and physical perversion. The entire diagram signifies mastery through the regeneration of the body, the illumination of the mind, and the transmutation of the emotions.
Thank you, Lynn. Any thoughts or questions? We'll use MPH's description of Knapp's illustration to introduce the characters and symbols that we'll be studying for some months to come during this chapter. First up, Hermes as the personification of universal wisdom. Before reading about Thoth Hermes, we need to understand that, as stated in the Secret Doctrine, Hermes was a generic nom de plume used by a series of generations of mystics of every shade. By most historical and occult accounts, there was an Egyptian avatar named Hermes, a singular avatar. But the writings ascribed to him came from many sources. Albert Pike's Morals and Dogmas gives us a fitting introduction to this great avatar. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. From the bosom of Egypt sprang a man of consummate wisdom, initiated in the secret knowledge of India, of Persia, and of Ethiopia, named Thoth, or Pitha, by his compatriots, Thoth by the Phoenicians, Hermes and Trismegistus by the Greeks, and Adris by the Ravens. Nature seemed to have chosen him for her favorite and to have lavished on him all the qualities necessary to enable him to study her and know her thoroughly. The deity had, so to say, infused into him the sciences and the arts in order that he might instruct the whole world. He invented many things necessary for the uses of life and gave them suitable names. He taught men how to write down their thoughts and arrange their speech. He instituted the ceremonies to be observed in the worship of each of the gods. He observed the course of the stars. He invented music, the different bodily exercises, arithmetic, medicine, the art of working in metals, the lyre with 3 strings. He regulated the 3 tones of the voice. It was he who taught the Greeks the mode of interpreting terms and things, whence they gave him the name Hermes, which signifies interpreter.
Okay, thank you. And another reader, please.
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. In Egypt, he instituted hieroglyphics. He selected a certain number of persons whom he judged fitted to be the depositaries of his secrets, of such only as were capable of attaining the throne and the first offices in the mysteries. He united them in a body, created them priests of the living God, instructed them in the sciences and arts, and explained to them the symbols by which they were veiled. Egypt, 1,500 years before the time of Moses, revered in the mysteries one supreme God, called the only uncreated. Under him, it paid homage to 7 principal deities. It is to Hermes, who lived at that period, that we must attribute the concealment or veiling of the Indian worship, which Moses unveiled or revealed, changing nothing of the laws of Hermes except the plurality of his mystic gods. The Egyptian priests related that Hermes, dying, said, "Hitherto I have lived in exile from my true country. Now I return thither. Do not weep for me. I return to that celestial country whither each goes in his turn. There is God. This life is but a death." Morals and Dogma 385-6.
Thank you, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this? I just love this introduction. Albert Pike sometimes really gets to the heart of his subjects. Any thoughts about this?
Big wow.
Big wow, especially these dying thoughts, right? It's just so indicative of someone who's completely soul infused, a master really who has taken on Maya Varupa and stayed fully conscious in the higher realms. It's really inspiring. Okay, next is here depicted with his foot upon the back of Typhon, the vanquished dragon of ignorance and perversion. Remember, there's 2 types of dragons, especially in Egypt. There's the dragon of wisdom and this type of dragon, right? The dragon of ignorance and perversion. The Egyptians also called him Apophis. Okay, let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on Typhon and his father, Typhoeus. And can we get a reader including the caption?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
You can see the dragon-like tendrils coming down out of the body of this Greek depiction here.
Zeus aiming his thunderbolt at a winged and snake-footed Typhon, Chalcidian black-figured Hydra, circa 540 to 530 BC. Typhon, Greek, Typhoeus in Hesiodic theogony is the son of Tartarus and Gaia, a fire-breathing titan with 100 heads and begetter of destructive hurricanes. He rebels against the gods and is killed by Zeus with a thunderbolt and buried under Mount Etna. Typhon was originally his son, post-type of himself, but the two were later identified as one. He represents the necessary counterpart of Zeus, as darkness is of light, Set of Osiris, or Satan of God. He is the dragon Apophis, the accuser in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, murderer of Osiris, destroyed by Horus. The dark side of Zeus as Set is the dark side of Osiris, and night the dark side of day. Python, Loki, Rahu, and falling demons in general. In one form, he is the dragon slain by Saint Michael or Saint George. The original meaning is sublime, for Typhon in its prototypical significance is chaos, the unorganized womb or fountain of production, which calls forth the creative energy by resisting it, and is equally necessary with the former. When humanity falls into matter, then these dark side potencies of nature acquire for mankind a distinctly evil connotation, and their names can be given to vast destructive forces, which the misuse of the human will has engendered.
Thanks, Scott. Any thoughts about this?
Is it equivalent to Leviathan?
Well, the Leviathan has other connotations, because the deep that the Leviathan swims in can also be seen as the heavens, or the depths of spiritual consciousness. But in another, like when Jonah was swallowed by the whale, the idea that you go into the form world and then you work your way back out of it, right? In that sense, it is definitely of the same ilk as this. And in fact, very often these types, snakes, dragons, have a very high and then this material connotation. Anyone else?
Yes, Greg, go ahead.
I was looking at this term Rahu, and Rahu is similarly associated with the out of Hindu and Eastern philosophy in terms of astrology. Rahu is one of the key issues of, I think it's related to the moon, but in terms of what's being said here, we might associate Rahu with the concept that it's that part of us that is ancient, but yet it's the part of us that needs to be released so that we can move forward.
Yeah, that's certainly a pragmatic interpretation of this concept, that's represented here in a number of in a number of different ways. Python, Loki, Rahu. Loki, for instance, just like Typhus, was originally part of Udan, right? He was considered a sacred figure, but then through the degeneration of the retelling of the text, he became the evil one, right? And you find that a lot, that they were originally one. And of course, if you think of the concept of the plus and minus, the polar opposites who eventually must become synthesized, and that begin resynthesized, I should say, and they begin in synthesis, right? So, and I think that's one of the teachings behind this idea.
I'm sorry, I'd also like to clarify that Rahu is the north node and Ketu is the south node. So they're, both the dragons in that respect, the south node representing the past and the north node representing the direction we're supposed to be moving into.
That's very interesting, isn't it? And you'd have to do a search to see if it's the same Rahu that's represented in philosophy, for instance, in Hinduism. And I just don't know enough to comment on that. If that is the same God, that north node being, is that the same God that appears in Hinduism? I just don't know. Fascinating. Any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, Joe.
Go ahead.
Joe, you've got your hand up. Did you want to say something else?
Yes, please. I'm just wondering how the world might be today if in the beginning with all of with these mysteries, that whether the darker side or the opposite side had been given compassion and understanding. As you said, that the idea is that we bring them back together. But I just wonder whether with all of the images and the stories of for example, light versus dark or whatever, whether in the beginning had had the darkness been seen as as misunderstood or has strayed and actually been offered compassion straight away?
Yeah, the Master Dwell Cool calls sin error. It's just error. And, we've all made errors. It takes that dark connotation of being sinful out of the equation. You, as long as you walk an error-ridden path, you can't expect to arrive, where you intend to go. And it somehow takes some of the negative connotations out. And it's much easier to it's easy to forgive or to have compassion for those who make errors, because we all do it, yours is a very profound question. And, eventually that's exactly what happens. As we progress, we're now in the 5th root race, and we're coming into awareness through development of mind. And eventually that mind comes into contact with the intuition. And intuition is called, Michael Robbins liked to call it direct knowing, right? It doesn't use the subject object aspect of lower mind. And so as we come into that, and even in the coming subrace, the 6th subrace of this 5th root race, where our process will become more illumined, right? And we'll have a surer guide within ourselves as to our own, as to our compassion for our own Typhon, right? And of course, that immediately spreads outwards to compassion and real wisdom as to how to work with Typhon as it has been set loose in the world. There's never a lack of examples of Typhon. Anyone else?
Martha?
I just, in the light of this conversation, I'm also wondering if that thought could have even been thunk in those ancient times. That perhaps it's a really good observation to observe that what the last speaker just raised is the open door that took this long to open.
I tend to think that there's an inevitability to the process because of the necessity to develop lower mind, as part of the purpose of the 5th root race. And it's inherently separative, so mind is, and therefore this duality, this aspect of Typhon is very much accentuated. Of course, through discipleship and a recognition of the purpose of the path, then we come face to face with the teachings that show us what lies behind this dualistic veil. And that was available in ancient times as well through the mystery schools, but for the most part, not in, as it is today, not practiced by the general public. We do one great stride we've made is that these teachings are now available to anyone who wants them. They're no longer secret, though there are levels that are secret, secrets of initiation, mainly things that could cause harm if misused. But in terms of the teachings that allow you to come into awareness of this duality that we're describing, those teachings certainly are available through a number of sources. I saw Yvonne had her hand.
Yes, go ahead, Yvonne.
I just noticed something on the 4th line down. 100 heads and a begetter of destructive hurricanes. So that's where the name Typhoon
Oh, yeah. Oh,
comes from. They
good
called it
point.
typhoon, destructive hurricane. I just noticed that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's really has worked its way into our language. I saw Carrie.
Yeah, Carrie, go ahead. Carrie, did you have something you were going to say?
There's also Typhon T, but that's not why I put my hand up. It's about the subject of compassion. In the Lord's Prayer, of course, we have, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So it's already present, this idea of compassion to sinners.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. If there wasn't this separated focal point that is considered unaware or evil, then there would be no need for such things as compassion. Yes, anyone else?
Yes, Joe says some also interpret sin as a misstep from the path.
Yeah, indeed.
And then Scott's got his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
One of the things about Ketu and Rahu that have always puzzled me in astrology is the interpretations we put on it. Now, Rahu and Ketu are the head and tail of the dragon, constellation of the dragon. And I was looking up something here, and it says it's the north node. Rahu is the demon's head longing to consume the luminaries in its gaping jaws. Rahu represents our fiercest desires, the compulsions which control us to such a degree that they may even swallow our essential self, our sun and moon functions. Generally, the consuming desires represented by Rahu are said to be sensual or materialistic. Ketu, the south node, is the tail of the dragon. It swallows things into a black hole, swallows up phobias, compulsions, hallucinations, illness. Ketu is as psychological as Rahu is material, but precisely for this reason, because it deals with the power of the unconscious, Ketu is also a significator of wisdom and enlightenment. And then
When it swallows up those qualities, does that mean it takes them out of demonstration?
I think it bottoms them out into the materialistic or sensual expressions. It's an eclipse. It's like why people go out and bang drums and scream during eclipses is because it seems like the head of the moon, the dragon, is swallowing the sun, trying to ward that off to keep it from happening. In a astronomical sense, what they are dealing with personally as well. He says that Ketu is thought to be a bit like Neptune and Mars in
that's 6 ray.
Yeah, the combination, which again takes us back to hurricanes and typhoon, with Neptune ruling the seas.
And therefore the emotion, and also the solar plexus is a 6 ray center associated with Mars.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That doesn't seem to jive with what BL was saying, and I think the usual traditional understanding of the North Node, which suggests the direction towards which we are aspiring, or should aspire towards.
That is I think the modern interpretation has been around.
Right.
But Ketu is also subject to all kinds of unreasonable fears and nightmares and mysterious ailments as the tail. So neither end of the serpent here, or the dragon, is necessarily good.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with I mean, there are complete dichotomies between what the Eastern tradition of Rahu and Ketu are versus what the Western modern or more modern traditions of them are. And while we typically think of Eastern as being esoteric, I do think there are some of the more esoteric connotations of them in our Western presentation of the North and South nodes.
I agree.
I have to say that Nicholas Nealon is, of course, very versed on this and in all of the permutations of it, but I just know the modern interpretations, both the exoteric and esoteric for the Western version of the South and North nodes, and minorly familiar with the Eastern version of them. So
The DK doesn't address the nodes, does he?
no, he doesn't. But then we also have to keep in mind that they're representatives of the moon, and he tells us that's a dead planet. So,
and what Scott was just saying suggests, the ramifications of that, of lunar consciousness, right?
right.
That material north and the more emotional or astral, even south nodes. Well, that's
right. Yeah. So there's a lot more involved, and thank you, Scott, for bringing those aspects into it, because I mean, we could have a number of webinars just on those alone, but yeah.
Well, if you think also of the serpent in Scorpio that has to be slain, and how similar it is to what Scott was just describing in this duality, this Ketu Rahu duality. So yeah.
Yeah, and the karmic interpretations of it all, because it does have to do with the moon and the past and all of that. So okay, Greg has had his hand up for a while. You want to go ahead, Greg?
Yeah. Another image or symbol that comes to mind with what's being discussed here in the Rahu Ketu relationship or representation is there's always it's a common symbol that we use worldwide, which is that of the Red Cross when they go around, and it's the Aurora Borealis, which
Borealis.
is no, not the Borealis. It's the Aurora Borealis, where the
Oh.
snake is eating itself.
Ouroboros, yeah.
Ouroboros, yeah, where the snake is eating itself, and that process of healing is always going on. And so when we see that Ouroboros on the Red Cross flags, it's a message to anyone. It's like a universal symbol that we're trying to heal. We're not trying to make any other kinds of identification with it. And so working with this process of the snake or the serpent or the dragon eating itself is a similar process, and maybe then one might be able to make an association that the North Node and the South Node are really about some of the most important soul level kind of healing processes that we all need to undertake.
Yeah, and traditionally the Ouroboros represents a time cycle, as well as in the infinity, which represents that which transcends the time cycle. And it does this by suggesting that the head and the tail are one, and where they come together is that place where linear time is no longer rules the consciousness. And Saturn also is associated with that same kind of reality. Anyway, anyone else on this before we move on? Okay. So I have a couple of notes here. In Avatar, conquering the forces of darkness represents two things. First, it reveals his or her own exalted spiritual status. And secondly, it indicates that he or she has paved the way for others to more easily follow, for others to be able to deal with their own demons, right? Through the anchoring of some divine energy on earth, as the Christ did with the energy of love, and as Hermes, Trismegistus, did with the arts, magic, and the sciences. Another important part here is that as a member of the race of giants, Typhon represents chaos, which was also an important adversary in the Udanic, the Norse mysteries, if you might remember. In fact, chaos actually eventually wins in that mythology. Okay, next up. To the Egyptian initiates, Typhon, the devourer of souls, signified the lower world which swallows up the spiritual nature of individual, who, being imperfect, is forced to descend from the higher spheres and be reborn into the physical universe. This brings up the idea of the underworld as a metaphor for incarnating into this world, an idea that informed the Assyrian and Greek mystery schools that followed. You may remember Ishtar, going down to get Tammuz, which is the incarnated aspect. The Christian doctrine, mistaking this metaphor for reality, puts forward the belief in the existence of a literal hell, right? Which has caused all kinds of, over the last couple of millennium, all kinds of misunderstandings about sin, etc. Okay, any thoughts about this? Okay. Next, to be swallowed by Typhon, therefore, signifies the process of rebirth.
Oops.
Yeah, I see that, but let me finish.
Okay.
From which man can only release himself by vanquishing his mortal adversary. This is all of a piece. So go ahead with whoever.
Joe?
Yes, I'm not sure whether this is completely relevant, but because it came to me, I hope it's okay to say it. That I'm very interested in words, and the underworld, as we know, is also known as Hades, and an anagram of Hades is shade. And I'm wondering whether, obviously, there's a link from shade to shadow.
Yeah. Well, the personality can be seen as the shadow of the soul, and it's all indicative of that which the truth that casts. It's like an extension out of the truth. It's the underworld. Or the shadow. It's always been interesting to me that evil is if the same four letters turned around is live, right? So life and evil are opposites. And DK himself says that evil is nothing more than an orientation towards the material aspect, which is the not self, right? The opposite of life. So, yeah. Anything else? Okay, so the statement, to be swallowed by Typhon, therefore signifies the process of rebirth, from which man can only release himself by vanquishing his mortal adversary. So this quote unquote adversary can be described as just simply as identification with the form aspect in the three worlds of human endeavor, of which Typhon is a metaphor. In his very scholarly work, The Gods of the Egyptians, E.A. Wallace Budge describes the ritual of the weighing of the heart, which led to either emancipation or rebirth. And this is going to be very familiar for those of you who were just at the Secret Doctrine webinar a couple of weeks ago. Same illustration, a little different, in a different subject. This I researched, and it actually really is from this 18th dynasty papyrus. So it's a more direct representative of the, for instance, the coloration, but it's not unlike the one we showed last time. Okay, can we get a reader for this?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. In the papyri of the 18th dynasty, we have representations of the weighing of the heart of the deceased in the great balance, which takes place in the presence of the great company of the gods, who act as judges and who pass the sentence of doom that must be ratified by Osiris, according to the report of the god Thoth, who acts as scribe and secretary to the gods. The Egyptian hoped that his heart would exactly counterbalance the feather, symbolic of Ma'at or the La. Ma'at or the La. Yeah. The act of weighing was carefully watched by Anubis, the god of the dead, whose duty was to cast the eater of the dead, the hearts which failed to balance the feather exactly, and by the guardian angel of the deceased on behalf of the deceased, and by a dog-headed ape who was seated on the top of the pillar and who supported himself upon the bracket on which was balanced the beam of the great scales. This ape was the associate and companion of the god Thoth, and he was supposed to be skilled in the art of computation and in the science of numbers and in the measurement of time. His duty as the weighing of the heart was to scrutinize the pointer of the scales, and having made sure that the beam of the scales was exactly level, i.e., that the heart and the feather exactly counterbalanced each other, to report the fact to Thoth, so that he in turn might make his report to the gods on the case under consideration.
Okay, so that's a pretty good summary, even though Budge tends to be, he's incredibly scholarly, but he tends to be somewhat exoteric in his interpretations. But you can pretty much count on him reading the text correctly. You can say that, or, but it's easy for a scientific bias that is we'll call bias to creep in with him. First of all, any thoughts about that? Now, here's the feather. Here's the representative symbol of the heart, right? And so the idea is that they are exactly balanced. Any thoughts about this? It's a brilliant, elaborate metaphor for moving into a place where the three worlds of human endeavor no longer play a part in your own consciousness, right? That your heart, which is the seat of impersonality, right, has stripped itself, you could say, of the weight of personality, and therefore is as light as a feather, right? And it is the heart of Ma'at, who is the great sky goddess, or goddess of the universe, and that's her standing at the scales. Now,
Francis?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was just thinking in terms of, modern language, and how when we talk about having a light heart, meaning that we are happy and have no worries, but then, that may have come from the root of this somehow. The
Yeah,
other
well,
thing is, esoterically, when we have a light heart, we have a radiated heart, from the soul, the light and the knowledge of the soul. So I thought those were two good connotations of this particular representation.
yeah, and also if you look at the feather represents the realm of air, which is the Buddhic realm, which is the goal of human endeavor, right? That's where we're headed. And so it's not a random symbol in that sense, Yeah, I saw a couple of hands.
Yes, we do, but we also have a comment here from Samuel. He says the analogy here would only be worth relying on if the word evil, for example, when reversed, where it continues to mean live, regardless of the language expressing it. Now
Oh,
I am thinking that maybe this is a coincidence.
yeah, okay, point taken. Yeah, point taken.
Okay, Joe, you got your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Yes, I'm thinking of high school physics, when you're told that I still don't believe it, by the way, but when you're told that a heavy object and a feather was given as an example, if they were dropped from a great height at the same time, they would land at the same time. And I'm wondering whether, for me, that to interpret it in this kind of context would mean that it is possible, that to for something as heavy as a heart to be perfectly balanced with a feather. So for me, that would be a kind of a sign in this reality that there is there's hope for those things to happen, even though it kind of, in my mind, I would think, well, that's not possible.
Yeah, well, some interesting points there. A cannonball and a feather would only land at the same time in a vacuum with absolutely no air resistance at all, because otherwise, of course, the feather would come wafting down. But that's sort of beside the point. The real point here is that you have to participate in a reality wherein the concept of gravity or physical weight is no longer the determining factor, right? That's really the metaphor here, because no heart will ever be physically as light as a feather. It's not possible, right? So in that sense, it's almost like a Zen coin. How can a heart be as light as a feather? Could be a Zen coin. Well, you have to go to the etheric heart center, and in order to you have to recognize heart energy rather than the literal physical. Anyone else?
Yeah, Yvonne, where'd your hand go? Did you want to say something?
I was just thinking, like you said, lighthearted. Also, I'm heavy-hearted. I'm overcome with.
Yeah.
So, is the ideal? It either has to be lighter, that a light as a feather, or lighter. The lighter the heart is, the purer it is a personality.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, the norm would be for this not to be the case, right? When you die, because this suggests a very high state of achievement. So, the average Egyptian dying wouldn't be expecting to have achieved this high state. This is like an initiatory level of consciousness, to have completely transcended the realms of physical activity, or the three worlds of human endeavor, all together. that suggests, a relatively high initiation. So it's the goal, this represents like the high goal. And they, those who are esoterically taught and, those Egyptians would recognize that the heart being given to this beast-like creature just suggests, like unto like, you are now will incarnate back into the animal human form. I see Carrie there.
Yeah, we got a couple, but before we go to the hands, Greg says it's more about the concept of mass. And then Tara says during initiations, we're supposed to be becoming less dense so that an angel can fall into us. And there isn't so much resistance. And I believe if you're doing evil deeds, wait a minute, you get kind of sooty, and this makes you heavier.
Absolutely. It's, it's using the same metaphors, right? Yeah.
And then one more real quick before we go to the hands. Joe says, I suppose my example was to demonstrate that there are clues everywhere.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Carrie, you want to go ahead?
I think we pointed out last time in the Secret Doctrine that the initiate actually became the teacher of the group above. It's the same person.
Became the initiator.
The person going through the initiation who successfully passed,
Yeah.
then on the upper line is actually the teacher of the next group.
Oh, that's really very interesting.
So maybe I just noticed it. I don't know whether we spoke about it, but
right. We were talking about this exact same phrase in the Secret Doctrine webinar, where this person is this person and has become raised and is now in the presence of the gods. And you're saying that it's the teacher position.
What I'm saying is this is the same person. The three, this one is before initiation. This one is, before the weighing of the heart. This one is after, so successfully passed, and then becomes the initiate teacher.
There you go. Okay, I gotcha. So before the weighing, after the weighing here, who he's then presented to Osiris and is what's called Osirified. I don't know if you remember that from the Secret Doctrine. And this would be to be made to identify, to be made in the image of Osiris, or to be to reconfigured in this image, to be Osirified. And then you have him on the upper levels up here. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Carrie. It's sort of obvious just look at it, but it's yeah.
Just going back to Joe's point, the experiment is with a bag of feathers, not with a single feather. So the bag of feathers initially weighs the same as the other, which was dropped. So that's why they land at the same time.
That's interesting. Either case, you need to take the wind resistance concept out of it,
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I see Scott's hand there.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
A couple of things. I think that upper register is maybe something else. What the Egyptians did in their depictions, and they often had 3 registers, was to demonstrate things sort of simultaneously in one picture. And I think what's up above there is actually precedes what is down below. And that is the supplicant here, the initiate to be, is sitting before the 42 gods who judge him. And after that comes forward with Anubis to the scale.
So the Minty, they're called.
Yeah. That's a third of them up there. 1/3, 14 out of 42.
Yeah, didn't they have to, in the Secret Doctrine, didn't we find out that they had to recite the names of all of them? And that's what I thought that was the supplicant reciting the names of all of the sages. Or
well, and also to verify to present himself as saying, when asked, "Did you ever murder?" He says, "I never murdered anyone." Did you
Right.
ever whatever? And he has to have 42 negations
I
of the
see.
didn't do. Proving
Yeah,
his
I'm convinced. I think that that's more likely than that it is the final state of being. That it's the first stage of this whole process, right? Because there's also something very final about being presented by Horus to Osiris. Where do you go from there? That's really when you enter this space where the four netters rule, that really is union with the Godhead, so I think I'm going to go with what you.
For the record, I also agree with Scott.
Yeah, okay. Well, then you're allowed to stay for the rest of the webinar.
The other point came to me was we were talking about lighthearted and heavy-hearted. That's not the physical heart. That's not the heart that's in that scale. Remembering that it's the solar plexus that moves we move the energy from the solar plexus to the heart. And the heart we're talking about in lighthearted and heavy-hearted is the solar plexus. A broken heart is the solar plexus. It's not the real heart.
I agree with you. It's my plenary presentation for the conference is going to be the transference of the solar plexus to the heart. They're both second aspect energies, which means they're on the line of the soul, and it is that line by which we ascend. And so it would suggest that when this vessel has been completely emptied of the personal orientation, which is what the solar plexus is sometimes called the mind of the lower man, right? And is literally the mind of the animal. So the mind of the lower man or lower animal man is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's very likely.
Sorry, I'm back again.
Yeah.
I just realized that the crossbar is completely horizontal, and therefore the feather side is going to be heavier because the strings are heavier.
Okay, Jerry. Yeah, I think you should make a model and make sure of that,
And I'm not, I think you gave Beitsch more credit than he deserves in terms of his interpretation. He was one of the earliest, and they are truly exoteric, I think, to begin with.
Esoteric or exoteric?
Exoteric.
Yeah, so do I.
You may touch on it, but generally nowadays they'll take off from him and go, well, this is really much more reasonable of what was going on. And I think what's interesting about this particularly, I don't know that they're ever supposed to actually balance. The idea was that the feather was going to be heavier than the heart. And that this is the true depiction. This is the way the Egyptians did it. They didn't make them equal. The feather was heavier than the heart of the man, truly pure.
Okay, I don't know about that. I mean, but the concept pretty much stays the same in either case, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else? Isn't it amazing?
How much a second time. Second time.
And all these things, remember last time we were looking at the colors of these and their indication, and that the fact that the first two of these were gods, and the ones that had beards and the ones that didn't. Obviously, there's a lot more that could be interpreted. I would love to get an enlightened Egyptologist, for instance, Schwaller de Lubitsch, his take on this thing. It would be an amazing thing.
Tara says, I think it's interesting that Regulus, the heart of the lion, is where we are supposed to get our Dian Chan. And if we don't purify, perhaps they'd be a heavier heart, like eating the pomegranate seeds for Persephone, eating from the earth. It sullies you.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes you down into the underworld, you know, that idea. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, the mystery schools would have been, had you moved into the higher levels of those schools, this would have all been revealed beyond the metaphor. Of course, it's revealed now, you know, in the 24 books of DK, it's all revealed in other language, you know, but these mysteries have always existed, always been available. But at this time, and at the time of Egypt, only to a few, only the few were had access.
And Greg points out that Aries opposite is Libra, and Libra is the scales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Aries being where in this? Anyway, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
One other thing I was thinking of, this particular weird creature that's under the scales and in front of Anubis is actually, it's a combination of various animals. You have a hippopotamus on the bottom and a crocodile on the top, and maybe, I don't know if it's an antelope or a lion or something in the middle. This was actually a symbol, one of the esoteric symbols of Capricorn.
Right.
That's where this judgment is taken and made. Do you come back or do you go on?
Wow. Yeah. It's this whole thing could be seen as Capricornian, couldn't it?
Absolutely, it's the judgment. And
Very good.
and
Yeah, this is connected with Makara.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's either the, you know, and this is the one that is his heart is fed to, as like the north node of the moon, swallows it in and you reincarnate. This is the creature. Bizarre.
Absolutely. It's the next slide here, the eater of the dead.
Yeah.
Which is an aspect of Typhon, but it is in the sense that it participates in the material aspect, right? You could say that it is that rebirth functionality, you know, the gateway to rebirth, which is interesting. Can anyone say, you know, now that Scott has pointed this out, this idea of, you know, the crocodile-headed hippopotamus bottomed and possibly, I don't know, lion-like or gazelle, who knows, wearing a t-shirt, no less. Does anybody have any thoughts about what the implications might be in this scenario in terms of Capricorn? I mean, we know Capricorn is the gateway out of, you know, into initiation, right? Just as Cancer is the gateway into human incarnation. So any thoughts about that?
We have a couple of thoughts and a hand up, but hold on. Greg, in answer to your question, he says Aries is the initiate, the person here whose heart is being weighed. And then Tara, she's got her hand up, but she also says she's thinking Geb and Nut.
Geb and Nut, yeah. Geb is the earth god. And she's overarched by Nut, who is the sky god, generally. And what was the reference to that?
I think what you guys were talking about. Anyway, she's got her hand up, so let's let her explain. Please go ahead.
Hi. So I was thinking that Geb and Nut was, I think it's a dual statue. It's a hermaphrodite, I believe, because when you become initiated high enough, which is in the sign of Capricorn, according to DK's books, you are supposed to have a different how do I say it? So you have like this angel come down into you, and you become they fall into you, and so you become two different people, a dual person, and that's and I know that that goes on in Capricorn. Capricorn is the initiation where you're supposed to be you become dual in that sign, and yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, you get in theosophical terms, that angel that comes into is the solar angel, and you basically become soul infused. That is to say, your personality becomes an automaton, or without the negative concept, it becomes the vehicle of the soul. So you are two in one, but the one now is the solar angel expressing itself in the realm of human endeavor.
Yeah, and you do not, I believe I read in DK's books that you become free after the fourth initiation, so you wouldn't have to be reborn. You get out of the cycle of rebirth after the fourth initiation, I believe. Maybe, I think it's the fourth, or it may be the sixth. It's the fourth or the sixth. I know that you have to, it has to be on the fourth initiation you have to do here on Earth, and then anything above that, the fifth and the sixth, can be in the fiery world.
Yeah, you break the causal body and the chains, what are called the chains of samsara, which is that being compelled to be reborn, because you've done it all. Your heart is light as a feather. You've done it all. You've done all the work that's needed to be done in this place, and you are now able to move on into this realm, into the God realm. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, Scott's got his hand up, but I just want to tell you that I looked it up, and Taweret, Taweret, is the ancient Egyptian hippo goddess, with the body of a hippo, the legs of a lion, and the face of a crocodile.
Okay, and that, I believe, let's see here, is also associated with Thoth. Ta'aret. I think in one of the previous signs, it was, slides, it was one of the names associated with Thoth. But anyway, good to know. Yeah.
And then Scott's got his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, this particular deity, the crocodile-headed one, is a common. They're amphibious animals, and it's said that the most dangerous animal in the rivers, like in Africa, is the hippopotamus, not the crocodile. The crocodile is amphibious, so it's air and water, or earth and water rather, combined. Right. And then you have the top, one of the symbols of Capricorn. And I think this is the lower symbol of Capricorn, where you're fed back into the world. The upper symbol is the one under the canopy. That's Osiris. They're the two ends of Capricorn, the low and the high. And this creature is obviously hungry. He's not going to get anything to eat from this guy. He moves on to the initiation of the real Capricornian god. The other one is this illusionary one that may have Syrian connections as to why it's those combinations.
And then, I'm sorry, I found another reference that calls him Amet, the devourer of the dead.
Yeah, that's it.
Which was in the eater of the dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a more, it appears to be a picture more similar to the one that you've got there. So anyway, those are a couple of references to it.
Okay. Anyone else? I saw Samuel's iPhone.
Samuel's hand is up. Go ahead. Samuel.
Hello?
There you go.
Yeah, the secret doctrine also made reference to the crocodile, and where he talked about M, the letter M, being androgynous, and that they also represent Magala, which means the 10th sign of the zodiac. So
Yeah.
I guess the idea that it's not a particular sex, you may say, kind of makes sense, So I don't have much to expand on that, but just the mention of it, the secret doctrine.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you. And of course, the letter M is often associated with a material aspect, representing Ma. So, yeah. Okay. So, anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, we have a couple of follow-ons. Greg says, and this is in relation to everything we were talking about a little earlier, soul-infused personality in your causal body is disintegrated at this point when your heart is lighter than the feather. And Tara says Leviathan is associated with the hippo.
Uh-huh. Okay. All righty. Let's move on here. So the Eater of the Dead was an aspect of Typhon, just as the dog-headed ape was who was seated on top of the pillar, but doesn't seem to be in this particular one. This is Ma'at, but I remember in others that there is a dog-headed ape also in this position. Was this associate and companion of the god Thoth. Anyway, let's go ahead. Great conversations, guys. This is terrific. I think this whole Egyptian section, which we're going to be in for quite some time, because the next chapter is the initiations in the pyramid. So we'll be in the Egyptian realm here for a long time. Okay, next, in one hand, Hermes carries the caduceus, a winged rod with two fighting serpents entwined about it. So, yeah, I see Carrie's hand up before we get going on this.
Carrie, go ahead.
I never realized that they were supposed to be fighting. I see this symbol so often, but
no, I think that's a very sixth-ray way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Only
more balanced.
sense that the dualities it's more representative of the yin yang quality of duality, or the plus minus in chemistry or physics. To make them fighting is not.
I think so. Yes.
I don't think that's it. Yeah, that's my opinion. Okay, so let's read about the caduceus. Can we get a reader, please? This is some. Let's see. I think there's two quotes from the Secret Doctrine and one from the Theosophical Glossary. So, can we get a reader?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Chemical science is now compelled by the very force of things to accept even our illustration of the evolution of the gods and atoms so suggestively and undeniably figured in the caduceus of Mercury, the god of wisdom, and in the allegorical language of the archaic sages, says a commentary in the Esoteric Doctrine. The trunk of Ashvata, the tree of life and being, the rod of the caduceus, grows from and descends at every beginning, every new Manvantara, from the two dark wings of the swan, Hansa, of life. The two serpents, the ever-living and its illusion, spirit and matter, whose two heads grow from the one head between the wings, descend along the trunk, interlaced in close embrace. The two tails join on earth, the manifested universe, into one, and this is the great illusion, Olanu. Everyone knows what the caduceus is, already modified by the Greeks. The original symbol with the triple head of the serpent became altered into a rod with a knob, and and the two lower heads were separated, thus disfiguring somewhat the original meaning. Yet it is as good an illustration as can be for our purpose, this Laya rod intertwined by two serpents. Verily, the wonderful powers of the magic caduceus were sung by all the ancient poets, and a very good reason for those who understood the secret meaning.
Okay, so here's the original caduceus as illustrated in the Secret Doctrine. You can see here the triple head, and it's true, you don't see this. It's usually just a knob shown here. So, and that does change the meaning, Okay, can we get a reader for this?
Yes. Jan, can you read that for us, please? Oops, I guess we lost Jan. Okay, Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
That the serpents were ever the emblems of wisdom and prudence is again shown by the caduceus of Mercury, one with Thoth, the god of wisdom, with Hermes, and so on. The two serpents entwined around the rod are phallic symbols of Jupiter and other gods who transform themselves into snakes for purposes of seducing goddesses, but only in the unclean fancies of profane symbologists. The serpent has ever been the symbol of the adept and of his powers of immortality and divine knowledge. Mercury and his psychopompic character conducting and guiding with the caduceus the souls of the dead to Hades, and even raising the dead to life with it, is simply a very transparent allegory. It shows the dual power of the secret wisdom, the black and the white magic. It shows this personified wisdom guiding the soul after death and its power to call to life that which is dead, a very deep metaphor if one thinks over its meaning. Every people of antiquity reverenced this symbol with the exception of Christians. Do you want me to continue?
Yes, would you?
Caduceus, the analogies found in every known cosmogony, all of which begin with a circle, head, or egg surrounded by darkness. From the circle of infinity, the unknown all, comes forth the manifestations of spirit and matter. The emblem of the evolution of gods and atoms is shown by the two forces, positive and negative, ascending and descending, and meeting. Its symbology is directly connected with the globes of the planetary chain and the circulations of the beings or life waves on these globes, as well as with the human constitution and after-death states. Significantly, in ancient Greek mythology, Hermes is a psychagogue, or conductor of souls after death to the various inner spheres of the universe, such as the Elysian plains or the meads of asphodel. The caduceus also signifies the dual aspect of wisdom by its twin serpents, Agathon Daemon and Cacodemon, good and evil in a relative sense.
Right. Any thoughts about this? You can find other quotes, but these two are pretty deeply indicative of the true meaning of the caduceus.
Joe has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Two things. Is it too obvious to say the caduceus looks like DNA? And the other thing is, again, with words, I discovered this ages ago that an anagram of tree is the French verb être, which means to be.
Mm.
And I know somebody said, it depends what language, but I believe that we notice what we need to notice,
Yeah. Well, the tree of life is a metaphor that you find in every mystery school going all the way back. So I think there's, and also even in theosophy, new initiates are called the little tree, suggesting that the newly admitted to the realm of life, right? The true life. So called little trees. Yeah, so yeah. Let's see, and what was your first point? Oh yeah, the idea of the DNA. Yeah, most certainly. You know, this duality that's represented by these two snakes is form life. That's what this, you could, you know, the line that separates this higher head from the lower, you can place this line in a number of different places. You know, for instance, in the cosmic physical plane, you could put it right under the Adi plane, that first and highest plane, which represents what's called the sea of fire, or absolute unconditioned deity in expression, right? And then everything below it representing duality. You can also see the Adi subplane, the first subplane of every total plane, as representative of the unified purpose of that plane. So the highest subplane of the mental plane, you know, which is called abstract mind, where the monastic permanent atom is, would have a conditional representation of the unity of the manas, which then in the 6 subplanes below it demonstrate in as duality, right? So that's just one of many meanings, right?
And then Tara says, in my opinion, the 3-head change to 2 and a ball signifies the third initiation in the Trinity, and the change that happens with 1 head becomes the Philosopher's Stone, a ball of mercury sulfide, cinnabar, and diamond triangles, the diamond soul. This is ball or person initiated that becomes or has with just one, the piece of me, though the universe I remain. And then she goes on to say they are giving away a secret.
Well, I just hope the designers of, you know, they put the ball on top, had that profound an understanding of it, you know, that it represents, you know, the Philosopher's Stone, and that form of unity in whatever method, I don't know. You know, Sacred Ox is the only place I've ever seen the third head. You know, it demonstrates a third head. I don't know if there are other sources for that or not. Anyone else? All right. So next up, in the other hand, how are we doing? Yeah. Hermes holds the immortal emerald, upon whose surface was inscribed in raised letters the sum of philosophy. So we're going to take a quick look. Can we get a reader for this excerpt from the Divine Pymander of Hermes? By the way, this was the first English translation. It came out in 1650. Could we get a reader, please?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. If we consult alchemical manuscripts, no matter the date or author or language, we find constant mention of Hermes Trismegistus, who was indeed considered and sometimes designated the father of alchemy. In a treatise attributed to Albertus Magnus, we are told that the tomb of Hermes was discovered by Alexander the Great in a cave near Hebron. In this was found a slab of emerald, which had been taken from the hands of the dead Hermes by Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and which had inscribed upon it, in Phoenician characters, the precepts of the great master concerning the art of making gold. The inscription consisted of 13 sentences and is to be found in numerous alchemical works. It is for the most part very difficult to understand, and in this respect closely resembles most of the great mass of the Middle Age alchemical literature. The following is cited as the inscription of the Smaragdine table, emerald tablet, and is to be found in very early MSS in various languages.
Yeah.
Sorry?
This just means
manuscripts.
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, I speak not fictitious things, but that which is certain and most true. Secondly, what is below is like that which is above, and what is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of one thing. Thirdly, and as all things were produced by the one word of one being, so all things were produced from this one thing by adaptation. Fourthly, its father is the sun, its mother the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, its nurse is the earth.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just continue on. New reader, please.
Okay. Fifthly, it is the Father of all perfection throughout the world. Sixthly, the power is vigorous if it be changed into earth. Seventhly, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, acting prudently and with judgment. Eighthly, ascend with the greatest sagacity from the earth to heaven, and then again descend to the earth, and unite together the powers of things superior and things inferior. Thus you will obtain the glory of the whole world, and obscurity will fly away from you. Ninthly, this has more fortitude than fortitude itself, because it conquers every subtle thing and can penetrate every solid. Tenthly, thus was the world formed. 11thly, hence proceed wonders which are here established. 12thly, therefore I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. 13thly, that which I had to say concerning the operation of the sun is completed. The story in the inscription, together with all books attributed to Hermes, who is asserted to have lived about 2000 BC, are still matter of dispute, occasionally vehemently, among the learned. In spite of the obvious difficulty of interpretation of the inscription of the Emerald Table, men, and men of extraordinary capacity, have not been wanting who have labored long and lovingly to prove its authenticity, to interpret it, and to show that it is, in good sooth, a marvelous revelation, full of sublime secrets of the considerable import to mankind.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, we're not going to go deep in this, but if you have a question about something, that he describes in this, you're welcome to ask. But MPH actually does a whole section on the Emerald Tablet a little later in the his presentation of this chapter. So these are 13 sentences, which are found in many alchemical works. Just wondered if there was a cohesive statement about them. Well, the cohesive statement seems to come in the end, where it's that's what I have to say concerning the operation of the sun. So this is all these 13 sentences, and you may never again get to say the word 11thly, BL.
I know. I'm sorry, I got a kick out of those.
Me too. So, it's interesting to look at these statements as functions of the operation of the sun. I like especially eighthly, ascend with the greatest sagacity from the earth to heaven, and then again descend to the earth, and unite together the powers of things superior and things inferior. Thus will you obtain the glory of the whole world, and obscurity will fly away from you. And you could see how that would relate. It's very obscure, but to the operation of the sun. And, you have to figure that this has been really strongly edited and what's the word? That this is a blind for the original, so those, who have ears to hear can penetrate maybe a little more deeply to the truth with what's been given, but that the original would have been truly illumined, worthy of being inscribed by a diamond-tipped scribe on an emerald tablet. But just the whole concept of an emerald tablet with these 13 statements is pretty mind-blowing. Okay, so next up, the figure wears the ancient Egyptian Masonic apron, according to the pattern discovered by Belzoni, the eminent Egyptologist. So often referred to as the Great Belzoni, this Italian explorer was also a pioneer Egyptian archaeologist and excavator of Egyptian monuments. It was he that removed the sands covering Abu Simbel. If any of you have been to Egypt, in the far south of Egypt, this fabulous temple, which was completely covered in sand. So he was very significant in Egyptian Egyptology. Here's an illustration from the Obelisk and Freemasonry by John Weiss, whose section heading reads the Belzoni manuscripts and illustrations of Freemasonry. So you can see the illustrations here. Could we get a reader for this short passage?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
The plate represents Pharaoh Osiris, king of Egypt, in Masonic communication with one of that order, whose head is covered with a mask, representing the head of the ibis. The king is invested with the triangular Masonic apron, holding in his right hand the Grand Masonic emblem and last grade obtained. The second drawing represents the triangular Masonic apron, united with the apron of serpents.
Thanks, Greg. Here's a comparison between Weiss's illustration and a temple carving painting of a similar apron.
Francis?
Yeah.
I just want to tell you I missed a couple of comments.
Okay.
And I'm sorry. Joe says an anagram of serpent is repents. That was earlier. And Tara says esoteric astrology, page 40, hierarchy 3, the third creative hierarchy is called the triads.
Oh, like the three heads. Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly representative of triadal duality. And here, here on this apron, you have that same caduceus like serpents, right? Because these go all the way up, kind of representing here you might have this central rod. It's a different, it's the same metaphor in it with slightly different representation, really. Anyone else? Was that it?
Tara says 3 head of Thoth in Shambhala, they are dualistic as well.
Right. Okay, and I see Joe has her hand up.
Go ahead, Joe.
I think that actually, I think the depictions are, I think they depict 2 very different things. I mean, the black and white one to me, 12 levels with, with the central rod going down, which could be the divine, as in 12 around one. And then the one with the colors is you've got 4 rods going down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, there could be. Yes, I forgot to count the colors. There could be 12 levels there.
Yeah, it's a little different. Like, for instance, these serpents, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it looks like here. And on this one, you have serpents here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's going to be variations. It's hard to tell what this is in the corners. But in wherever he got this, whatever apron he illustrated this one from, had these, what looks like solar faces in the corners, but it's hard to say, maybe lunar. I just don't know. I haven't read an interpretation of these aprons, which would be fascinating, really would be interesting. But good points. Anyone else?
I just wanted to. Oh, sorry.
So sorry. Could I just add that that are we not? I'm sorry. I hope this doesn't sound rude, but are we not kind of supposed to intuit the interpretations for ourselves personally for the message?
Well, that's an interesting question. If you're capable of intuiting, then more power to you. Until you can get a direct line to your intuition, it's useful to study and to interpret the symbols that are represented. That eventually leads to, and this is from the words of DK in the beginning of Glamour World Problem, where he has this little 15-page section on symbolism. He says, study symbols and it will develop your intuition. Okay, anyone else?
I just wanted to say that those do look like suns in the corner there, and the rays going up, and it looks more so like the sun's rays on the colored version, but you see the sun's face more on the black and white. But yeah, those look very similar to me.
Yeah, I think it's probably a different apron, but it's, it's so, the motifs are quite similar, yeah, right down to the 3, what looks like tassels here, but when they're seen here, it makes it clear that they have a very specific meaning, like 3 levels. But let's not spend time trying to interpret this unless you really know or have an idea of what these might mean, because we're kind of shooting in the dark here. Okay, anyone else? Okay. All right, back to the illustration. In the upper circle is the ibis, whose curious characteristics have caused it to be particularly associated with the medical arts. In the initiation ceremony, the Egyptian priests wore masks in the form of the ibis head. You can see that here in this illustration on the left, to signify that they represented the attributes of Thoth or Hermes. Okay, so could we get a reader for this, please? I love this. This is original. This is actually ancient. It's just in phenomenal shape. This I was talking about the ibis showing here. Okay, yeah, reader, please.
Eric,
the ibis, sacred to Isis, who is often represented with the head of that bird, sacred also to Mercury or Thoth, because that god assumed its form while escaping from Typhon, was held in the greatest veneration in Egypt. There were two kinds of ibises. Herodotus tells us in that country, one quite black, the other black and white. The former is credited with fighting and exterminating the winged serpents which came every spring from Arabia and infested the country. The other was sacred to the moon because the latter planet is white and brilliant on her external side, dark and black on that side which she never turns to the earth. Moreover, the ibis kills land serpents and makes the most terrible havoc among the eggs of the crocodile, and thus saves Egypt from having the Nile infested by those horrible saurians. The bird is credited with doing so in the moonlight, and thus being helped by Isis, as the moon her sidereal symbol. But the nearer esoteric truth underlying these popular myths is that Hermes, as shown by Epimetheus de Culti Egypt, watched under the form of that bird over the Egyptians and taught them the occult arts and sciences. This means simply that the ibis religiosa had and has magical properties in common with many other birds, the albatross preeminently, and the mythical white swan, the swan of eternity or time, the Kalahansa.
Thank you, Carrie. And we'll just finish by reading this, and then we'll be done for the day.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Let him turn.
Before you start, Scott, I want to point out, this is a Secret Doctrine quote, and she cites this very frieze. It's pretty rare to be able to actually find the exact artifact that's being discussed. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, there's more than one of these, but there's an initiation ceremony, but it was very striking. I remember seeing it. Let him turn to some most suggestive Egyptian bas-reliefs. One especially from the Temple of Philae represents a scene of initiation. Two gods, hierophants, one with the head of a hawk, the sun, the other ibis-headed, Mercury, Thoth, the god of wisdom and secret learning, the assessor of Osiris' son, are standing over the body of a candidate just initiated. They are in the act of pouring on his head a double stream of water, the water of life and new birth, which stream is interlaced in the shape of a cross and full of small ansated crosses. This is allegorical of the awakening of the candidate, now an initiate, when the beams of the morning sun, Osiris, strike the crown of his head, and his entranced body being placed on his wooden towel so as to receive the rays. Then appeared the Hierophants initiators, and the sacramental words were pronounced ostensibly to the son Osiris, addressed in reality to the spirit son within, enlightening the newly born man.
Okay, this is the kind of information that you will never find in archaeology. This comes through the masters that work through HPB, and so we have a very privileged insight, in my opinion, into the nature of these Egyptian initiations. And let's see, where did they say this one was from?
Philae.
Yeah, and this particular frieze is from Philae, so it's very likely the one. Notice that there are two types. There's this sort of animal-headed. Let's see, did I go further? Yeah, I did go further. So here you see the encore ansated cross, which represents life, is interspersed with the Vas, W-A-S, Vas or Vas symbol, which represents control over the forces of chaos, right, in the ancient Egyptian. And of course, both were symbolic of initiation. Okay, yeah, Joe.
And where they meet in the stream of water, do they make another symbol?
Well, this is,
On the left, it's easier to see, I think. The second ankh up from the left-hand corner.
well, here's the
Yeah, there, and the next one, and then up the circle. It becomes the lower part of the other symbol.
Yeah, I'm only seeing these two symbols, but you know,
Okay.
perhaps. Okay, folks, that's gonna do it for today. BL, do you have announcements for time for the next 2 webinars?
I do, but quickly, I have a couple of comments here that I want to read. Tara says, looks like the mother and the father wearing bird masks as they make the sun, the body in the middle, the third initiation.
Okay.
And then she goes on later to say fixed cross to cardinal cross, the Tau. And then Greg says also the blue heron of North America is also like the ibis that's described here. So those are the remaining comments that we had.
Okay, well, I'll just address the 2 birds idea. There is something of the lunar god in Thoth and in the ibis. It was, you know, it did its work at night, if you remember from the quote from the SD, right? And then, of course, there's no question of Horus as the solar god, the hawk of the solar god. So, you know, it's a good observation in that the 2 forces together with the 2 symbols, you know, form the initiatory process. So, all right, yeah, for dates.
Okay, our next Secret Teaching of All Ages is 1 May, 7 p.m. GMT, same link that we've got here. And our next Secret Doctrine will be first. It will be in 2 weeks on the 17th of April at 7 p.m.
Okay.
Same link that we're using for both webinars. So we hope to see everybody there.
Yes, thank you all. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.